Coops, you're in my hot seat. That's where I normally do my.
Do you want to go here?
No, mate. Listen,
No,
I'm
mate.
feeling a little challenge coming.
You got. I don't want to be challenged, bro.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's doing his best.
No, well, we don't have to worry about Dad.
No.
When he was a kid, I used to say to him, "Son, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And he said, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to take all your jobs." And I used to laugh.
And jokes as well.
Yeah. Well, they don't really work.
No, they're not that funny, but
And now you're working together. I love that combo, mate.
we're a team.
Nice family unit, family team. That's what it's all about.
Well, if you can't trust your family,
Well,
who can you trust? Yeah, you know what I mean?
No one.
No. Apparently not. No, that's what we live by. So we're out of your studio here, Ant. Well, where you record your podcast, Head Game.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So run us through what it's about first.
So Head Game is just talking to ordinary people that have extraordinary stories. So what I do is I tap into their mindset on how they've overcome certain situations, the mindset they utilized, and whether that was fear, panic, whether they were facing a certain phobia. Because the people that I interview are left with one option in life, and it's almost like a do or die. And sometimes it is that serious. They've got to make a decision, otherwise they're not going to make it through. But also do or die with decisions about work, decisions about family. All these hard choices and how they got through certain situations. So it's fascinating because everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Mate. Everyone has a story.
Well, I imagine sports people and military people, that's your strength. Like they're probably people you relate to most. Who surprised you of the guests you've had on?
Do you know what? I've had all sorts of guests, and this is where Nova's so good at just, handpicking these individuals, because I like to really not do too much homework. I like to just take them at face value, really tap into their story. And I might have certain questions, for example, and then I've asked none of them. The producer's like, Ant, you've asked none of these questions, but what a hell of a podcast, because we just go off on a tangent and I just really feel where they're going and try and extract their story of raw emotions. So I've had people that have had their faces ripped off by bears in Canada. I've had people stuck in mines, where the oxygen's diminishing and they're slowly dying, but they're having to really dig deep psychologically and pull on certain emotions, whether that's family, whether that's loved ones, whether that's just the sheer will to survive. And what I love about my podcast is these people are left with one option. And when you're left with one option in life, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve.
That's so true, isn't it? When you look at things like, and we always liken it to sport, is people say, when you go into professional sport, you've got to do one thing. You've got to make sure you've got a plan B. Well, sometimes you want to make it in sport, don't have a plan B. Right? It's all or nothing.
Matty, you are bang on there. And it's the same in the military. As long as there's a plan, there's a way through. A lot of people are so risk adverse nowadays. What they want a plan. They want the solution, the option, and then they want a plan A, B, C, D, and E around it. And they go, right, as long as we've got 3 or 4 plans around it, then we can execute what needs to be done. No. Is there an option? Is there one option forward here? If there is, go for it.
Well, you've had an amazing life, Ant, but more recently, you just got back from Everest base camp as well, because the big fella here, Matthew, mate, he doesn't like to toot his own horn. He's very humble, but he went to base.
I do.
Yeah, he went to base camp as well with a few of his ex-teammates.
Yeah, well, we did actually. I'll tell you what happened, Ant. We did it, and then we went and celebrated after we hit it. And then a guy come to the tea house and said, "Listen, there's one further up, Kalapatan. Why don't you do that one? This one's not too hard." And me and my old captain, we went and did it. I've got to say, I've got so much respect for you military guys, because I remember doing it, get up in the morning, just feeling that sick in the stomach. And I'm walking up and I'm saying to my old captain chief, I said, I'm exhausted, I'm sick in the stomach, I'm deteriorating quickly. Can you imagine being in war, where you're in Kabul and there might be someone hiding in a cave and everything? It's just like, it shows the mental toughness of you guys.
Do you know what, Matty? Just to do Everest Base Camp is no easy feat. People think that it's at the base of a mountain. It's 5,300 meters on the way to Mount Everest, which sits just below 9,000 meters. So you're more than halfway up Mount Everest. It's higher than most of the 7 summits. So just to get there, with the lack of oxygen, and the lack of knowledge, and I always say to my clients, because I took 10 clients recently up to Everest Base Camp, listen to your body, be aware the altitude will pinch you in the arse at a certain time that you won't expect it. Your emotions will be everywhere. You feel like you can't breathe. You start to panic and fear will kick in. And that's when you know that you need to really, really listen to your body. It's no easy feat, mate. So hats off to you. And I summited Mount Everest actually to the top in 2018.
So you went to the top?
Yeah, I went to the top in 2018. And then I just took 10 clients on a sort of VIP expedition to Everest Base Camp.
Yeah. When you've been to the top, when you do base camp, I imagine, do you not feel like the lack of oxygen since you've been to the top is your like white blood cells that you must have not really felt anything going to base camp then, or? No,
you always have to acclimatize. Once you're away from the mountains, let's call it, once you've sort of come down from the mountains, there's probably a 2-3 week period that you're acclimatized. So say I came down from Mount Everest and I wanted to go and jump on, let's say, the fourth biggest mountain in the world, or the fifth, Lhotse, for example, which sits I think it sits at 8.3. I will be acclimatized to go and do that. However, if I'm away from the mountains for 2-3 weeks, then I have to acclimatize. So I have to go back into the process of making sure that I take my time, making sure that that I'm well fed, I'm well nourished, because the higher you get, the lack of oxygen sort of suppresses your hunger. It suppresses all of your main organs. Therefore, your body's slowly shutting down.
Well, this is now. Look, I haven't done Everest, but I've been to Air Locker. So I don't know if you.
Oh wow!
I haven't.
Okay.
Shit. This is such a wrong room to bring this up. But I did Air Locker the other day.
I'll get a journo to call. This is an amazing story. How's this leading off,
mate? They'll make documentaries about this shit. I went to and look, I've been retired from rugby league for a year and a half, 2 years. So I talk about acclimatization for training. I'm not well acclimatized to get back in the gym, but I went and did Air Locker. Holy heck, when they strip the oxygen out of it, it is that tough. Like the lack of, if you do a big effort on an assault bike or something, and then you're trying to get your breath and recover, you just don't get it. Like you actually just cannot get your breath back. Like it was tough. I spewed, not proud of it, but I spewed everywhere in that Air Locker gym. And people were like scoffing at me.
Good, mate. That means you were working.
No. It wasn't like that, because it was like 5 minutes in.
Well, okay. Speaking about mental toughness, mate. So, Ant, you learnt a lot about life, mental toughness, about people through the military, as tough as it gets. 17 years of age. Now, you served Northern Ireland, Macedonia, Afghanistan.
Yep.
You did security work in Africa.
Yep.
I can imagine they're all so different. What was the I'm trying to, scary is not the word I don't want to use, the most unpredictable. What did you find the most challenging?
Do you know what? Throughout my career, I suppose I was introduced quite correctly into the process. So when I passed, when I was 17, I passed. I was in the Royal Engineers, but then I passed P Company, which I became a para engineer. So I had my maroon beret, had my parachute wings, and I deployed to Northern Ireland, but it was a piss up. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
it was, we were winding down from the sort of early 80s, late 70s, and really just handing over. But that was my first sort of peacekeeping tour, where I sort of eased into the process. And then Macedonia was a little bit hairier. We were trying to prevent a civil war from happening, therefore collecting arms from locals and from rebels. So there's a bit of hostility there. There's a bit of action there. And then the Afghanistan was just a completely different ball game. I went from being a para engineer to then joining the Royal Marines, which is the elite of the conventional forces, and again, not special forces, of the conventional forces. And I've done a tour of Afghanistan as section commander there. And it was kinetic. You're seeing IEDs go off, you're seeing your muckers getting blown up, and that was like, wow. You want to play soldier. This is it.
What's your role in that as well? Like, are you like on the ground? Are you sniper? Are you?
So at this stage, I was a section commander, so I was in control of 7 other men. There's 8 in a team. So I'm patrolling around. I'm given an area of operations that I have to patrol and that I have to take ground and then keep the ground. And it's my job with my team to maneuver us through this maze of compounds, basically. And obviously through the maze of compounds, where the enemy know we're going, during that time it was IED central. It was just like sometimes you just hope and pray that that you weren't the one that's going to get blown up into the air.
Yeah. I mean, Winston Churchill, he once said, and you go way back to that time, and there's been a lot of lessons learned since then. He said one of the 2 biggest rules of war is don't invade Afghanistan and don't invade Afghanistan. And that was before the Soviets, before we went in there. What makes it so difficult? Is it purely the nature of the people?
No, do you know what? It's the terrain. The terrain is vast. These guys, so sophisticated when it comes to tunneling, when it comes to caving, and building a fortress within the mountains which you can't see. So ultimately, it's all well and good, facing an enemy, but then trying to chase or hunt down an enemy that you're in their backyard. You're going up to these caves, and they're well versed in the mountains. We used to know that if we had an operation in the mountains, that we were up against it. In the villages, in the towns, not so well trained, but in the mountains where they cached all their weapons, they cached all their IED stuff, they cached absolutely everything. They were hardened fighters. You could tell, you could tell the difference of terrain. As soon as I knew that we were hitting the mountains, and then we had to obviously, scale up the mountain to attack, and then they'd disappear. And then you'd look down certain caving holes and certain tunnels, and you could just tell it was IED central. You wouldn't booby trapped up to you. You wouldn't even dare go down there. So they were so good at maneuvering and evading.
Sorry,
you go. Yeah.
How did you feel, Ant? Given the time you spent over there, given the fact that you lost comrades and friends, how did you feel of that scene when we were rushing to get out and people were rushing to get on the planes? How did that make you feel?
Do you know what? On one hand, I felt proud because 20 years ago, no one was rushing to get out of Afghanistan. So when you looked at it from a bird's eye view, you think to yourself, "Oh my God, this is absolutely horrendous." They're holding on to planes. They can't wait to get out. They weren't doing that 20 years ago.
Yep.
It's only because we came in and we started educating their women. We started putting schools in for their children. And we started building infrastructure. We started giving them clean water. We started painting a normal life for them. So when that was stripped away from them, they weren't running from they were running because they were used to 20 years of used to a semi-normal life.
Yep.
They were used to structure, they were used to a bit of discipline, they were used to having infrastructure around them, good schools, good education, and all of a sudden that's whipped away. Of course they're going to be running for the hills because they know that all of that's going to get stripped away from them as well. So on one hand, I thought to myself, what are they doing? And I almost wanted to, put my hands over my eyes and go, cringe, Biden, what are you doing? And then on the other hand, I was just like, but look what we created. They now know what normality is. And they now know what civilization is. They're blessed with that. So ultimately what they're doing is they're fighting for that, which for me, I took a sense of pride out of that because I thought I was part of helping them, realize what life is all about.
One of my favorite movies, American Sniper. Right. Mm-hmm. I always think about this as how accurate it is as a depiction when he's up on this and he's trying to get an idea of whether the kid's a civilian or he's carrying a bomb, and he has to make a decision to shoot to save his soldiers or whether to leave him, because I imagine there's a lot of accountability as a leader of a group.
Yep.
You in that role, did you ever have those, especially when you're in Afghanistan, like where you don't know if they're a threat or they're a civilian, and how do you make that choice?
Absolutely, especially when I went from being, so I'd done 3 tours of Afghanistan, one as a section commander in the Royal Marines, and then 2, then after I got back from my first tour of Afghanistan, I went on Special Forces selection pass, And within 2 weeks of passing selection, I went straight back out to Afghanistan as a special forces operator, not a conventional force, special forces, hunting down high-value targets, nighttime operations only, MVGs, go in, get the job done, hard arrest missions where we would have to capture certain individuals to get information out of them to prevent a bigger devastation from happening. So my world sort of turned into this sort of, let's James Bondy and beyond, and then talk about, the enemy using women, using children. These, I'll give you an idea of just how far they will go. We were after an IED facilitator, a high value target, HVT. And the reason we knew he was in country, because what they do, they go over to the border and then they come back in, organise their troops, and they nip back over the border where they think they can't be touched. And a really big IED went off, and it killed something like 8 Royal Marines. And this IED was a kid with a wheelbarrow. It's a wheelbarrow bomb, but a kid in a field, farmer in a field, kid in a field, not knowing what he's pushing, pushes it past the patrol. The patrol doesn't think anything of it. It's got hay over it. Boom, the whole thing goes up. Children collateral, right? This child was just collateral. 8 dead, and that's just one example of making that decision, right? Yeah. They got that wrong that day. They should have probably have, and it's easy to say, they probably should have stopped the child anywhere near you. Wheelbarrow, but again, these are young Marines. They're 18, 19, 20 years old. They're kids themselves, so they're just like, yeah, come through, kid. It's the same with us. We used to hit targets, and we used to go into rooms, deal with the HVT's sort of security, if you wish, because that'd be our first line that we needed to penetrate in order to get to the high value target. And the closer you got to the HVT, you'd come up against, they'd just run past, grab a kid, give a kid or woman. They were very good at giving women weapons, because what we do naturally, because we're elite, good soldiers and good men, we would go in, and if it was a woman or children, we would naturally, and I hated doing it, but you'd naturally pause. You'd naturally go, whoa, this, because of humanity, I suppose, because of what we've been brought up in society, to look after our children, to look after our women. So there was always that, and it was one of those, do I pause and potentially put my life at risk and my pal's life at risk? Or do I neutralize what's in front of me that could potentially take a life? So we were met up against that all the time, and they were very good at doing that.
Yeah, that's such
imagine, I think sometimes now, Ant, and I've got to be careful how I word this, but I just don't know these days how much incentive there is for young people to go into military, given the fact that in the society we live in, when they come back, they're put in those situations like that. And if they make a mistake, they come back, and we've seen situations where they're put on war crimes with no thought to what the scenario they've been put into.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I've always gone into? Because when I joined the Special Forces, because I'd done so well on selection in the jungle as point man, because I just loved that role. I love to be a sort of a leader in my own right, and even though I wasn't the team leader, I was leading the team. So that, I always loved doing that. And I've always wanted to, because I know my capability with on the battlefield, I'd always say rather me than someone else, because, I've just, maybe wired a little bit differently. I love being point man. I was really, really keen and purposeful and driven to do what's right as well. And being point man in the Special Forces and the missions that we do, we're in firefights every single night. There's no doubt about it. Whether it's close border operations, whether it's in the province itself. But I came up with an ideology that really, really worked for me. Now, I believe that no one has the God-given right to take life. I truly believe that. However, if you think that you've got the right to take someone else's life, I will simply deny you that right by taking your life, therefore saving a life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it is always, so when people say to me, Ant, what's it like taking a life? I'm like, well, I can tell you what it's like saving a life. And you know, as long as that saving a life was there, then I'd have no problem pressing the trigger. And I've been in situations before, and you know, I go over the situation time and time and time again, where I've been there behind, you know, we've breached a compound. I've seen, you know, I've got my MVGs on. I've seen someone in a doorway with a weapon, and I've had my laser on their head, you know, and I'm just like, and every instinct in me, this is how I knew, how I know I was a good soldier. Even though I could pull the trigger, yeah, and I had every right to, because we were, you know, our rules of engagement are a little bit different, and the compound that in question is you know, is full of high value targets. I'd never done it. I was never a bully with a weapon. So, you know, it's like, and I think to myself, well, that was the high value target that we then went in and captured, and that we put through the system, and now is back out 2 months later being processed. Is now we're going after the same guy. You know, I think to myself, should I have pressed the trigger? And but then it's like, no, because in that moment, in that time, that I wasn't denying him the right of not taking a life. So therefore, what life was I saving? None.
You seem like the kind of bloke that's got a good read on people, and we're going to talk about SAS in a minute. But before we move on to that, like, did you see people that you served with? You can tell you have a conscience by how you're thinking about your actions over there, how you justify taking a life. Were there people there who had tendencies like, if they weren't in the military and they weren't channeling that energy into that, like they'd be killers in general society? Like,
Cooper, let me tell you something. You know, when you train and train and train and train, it's like, you guys will know, like, you train because you want to play in that cup final. You want to play in that playoff. You want to win that trophy. For us, going into a kinetic, you know, into the deep dark corners, where the fight is at its highest order, we want that. Right, this is what we trained our whole lives to do, especially going through the shit of becoming a Marine. I was a sniper. I was a primary fires operator. You know, I controlled bombs in the air. I controlled drones. I controlled aircrafts. I was a point man. You know, it's very hard when you, and again, I'm just putting it bluntly, when you taste blood, to not be like a dog on a bloodlust.
Yeah.
You know, it's when you punch that hole, and you're like, and you're in the moment, and it's, you know, it's like, at first you're like, you know, you're literally, you need you or your mucker to recognize that, and this is in the heat of the night, to recognize that, to fucking pull you back into check, which we were doing. Also, you know, very first few missions, you know, pulling each other back, going, fucking look me, like, calm. You know, once that room was clear. Right, fucking calm yourself down. Room clear. Let's regather our thoughts. Where are we going next? Right, into the next door. And I could tell straight away. People could tell with me. But that's where teamwork comes into play. It's not just a case of me having your back and you having your back. It's me grabbing you because I know that this fucking firefight has got the better of you. And it's really the psychological side behind being a special forces operator goes way beyond the mission. You know, people say, you know, be dedicated and committed to the cause. I'm like, we're special forces operators. You better believe we're dedicated and committed. That's not an added extra. We don't come into work and go, hey, let's be dedicated. That's already ingrained. That's in my DNA. That's in my blood. It's about being dedicated and committed to each other, right? Because the mission is there. It's about, you know, getting everyone through that mission, being dedicated and committed, just knowing that something's not right and pulling you into check. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
And I was watching last night. I was watching Blood Diamond. First time I've seen it.
Love that film.
Great film.
Love that film.
Excellent.
Of course,
Leo. Love that film. Yeah.
So Sierra Leone and Liberia, and I'm watching the film, and you're dealing with child soldiers, and like so many levels of tragedy. You were a VIP security in Africa.
So that was after. So I actually done a tour of duty in Sierra Leone when I was in the Royal Marines. So the private security stuff came after, due to the contact that I made in Sierra Leone. So I was out there in 2005 or 2006 doing a short-term training team. So teaching them elite jungle warfare tactics, basically. You know, it's the Sierra Leoneans are great people. They've got a wonderful country. full of minerals, very rich, but just very corrupt, unfortunately. But their military are great. And when I left the military, I got a phone call from the Attorney General saying, we are now part of NATO. Can you come and train our first ever snipers to deploy to Somalia? So I took that contract on straight away. So I trained their first ever snipers in Sierra Leone. I trained 3 batches of them to send over to Somalia. So that's where that is sort of, when I left the military, I went straight into sort of like a government military job anyway. So that was my role in Sierra Leone. But
wow,
what a great country, great people. And it is my favorite country in the world.
Wow. Okay.
Sierra Leone.
Yeah. What was it like working with NATO compared to what you were used to? Whereas, given there's a lot of red tape as far as NATO's concerned.
Do you know what? Being a private contractor is great, but you haven't got the top cover. You haven't got the top cover of the military, especially the special forces. The missions that we done were so highly kinetic and dangerous, but safe at the same time, because above me I had 2 Apaches, I had a gunship, I had a fixed winged asset, I had 2 drones, I had I could call in fast air whenever I wanted, I could call in the Apaches to take out and neutralize a direct target, so they were constantly at our disposal. When I left the military, that top cover just went. You're
feel
almost
naked.
Yeah, you're almost out there
Wow.
by yourself. So even though I'm training these soldiers, I am the top cover. It's a whole different world, and you don't feel unsettled by it, but you're out there by yourself.
SAS Australia.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic show. First question, someone that we're very close to, Sam Burgess.
Yeah.
Sam Burgess, how long would it take Sam Burgess, do you think, or Bathan, to become a Special Forces?
He'd have to shrink his head first and foremost, because he is a sniper's dream.
It's a big target, eh?
And talk about American sniper. I could hit that head from 2K away.
With your eyes closed.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be harder not to hit it.
From the hip. Do you know what? When he got stuck in the tube, it wasn't his shoulder that got stuck. It was his head.
Oh, yeah.
I remember just looking through, and his boulder heed. No, do you know what? Someone like Sammy is. Do you know what? It's discipline. That's what differentiates us, the British Special Forces, from the rest. Is not, we've got no different weapons, no different tech. It's just the attention to detail through being consistently disciplined at a level where that grain of rice is out of place, that epaulet is out of place. That it's so finicky, and you're sort of directed from such a young age. This is the military in general. And then what I didn't realise when I joined the Marines is that I was being pushed down the Special Forces route due to my potential, etc., etc. But the attention to detail that we have, and the minor details, and the psychological work that we do, which is the biggest, best kept secret of the United Kingdom Special Forces, is way beyond what anyone else does.
Yeah,
well, you see, like, from a sporting background, particularly Sam, you see sporting teams always draw on military for inspiration, but for lessons. Like, we used to do army camps when I was at the Melbourne Storm, and the biggest lesson you take from it is when, and it's actually hard in today's society, pushing players and pushing people past a breaking point, like, for safety reasons. But back in those days, particularly Sam would have experienced it, when you push someone so far beyond a breaking point, the lessons you take from yourself, like the lessons you learn about yourself. When Sam went on that show, you can see that's a bloke who's just done. He's had so much work, particularly psychologically, so mentally resilient. Like, and that bleeds through the TV. Like, the whole audience sort of could notice that.
Mate, I got in his face as well. I was calling him a big-headed moron, and and I was going, "You're fucking pathetic. You failed this course," and I was spitting in his, because I was just waiting for a crack. All I want from people, and I'm not waiting for a crack in a bullying type of way, or in a crack in your personality that needs developing. right? It's got nothing to do. I want to develop your weakness. So, you know, I don't want to play to your strengths. I know where your strengths are. I'm happy with that. You know, I can almost go, do you know what? That's 70% of you done. That's what I do. That's what I do with every single recruit. I go, right, where's their strengths? Yeah, happy with that. Yep, don't need to work on that. Where's their weaknesses? Where's their insecurities? You know, where are their cracks? And all I want to do is dig into them and find the tools that they need to develop that. And that's exactly what I was doing with Sam. And, you know, the one time that Sam cracked is when he said he couldn't get through that tube.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That was awful to watch. I felt claustrophobic watching it.
Let me tell you the story about this then, just quickly. So we start off, we're there 2-3 weeks before, you know, I'm doing everything. I'm jumping out the helicopters, doing all the rehearsals, making sure, because everything we put them through, we go through. But then when the tubes came up, you know, going through there and you know, this is about it's about, you know, facing your fears and phobias, and that one was claustrophobia, darkness. It had loads of things in there. And when we first got there was two tubes, one big tube and one small tube. And I said to the producer, I said, why have you got 2 tubes here? They said, oh, because some people are bigger than others, because I don't want to know who's on the course at this stage. And I'm like, well, no, that's you know, there's got to be one tube. It's a small tube, and they're like, Ant, but you know, we've got some big people, and so I go, I get Foxy. I go, Foxy, come over here, and there's a bit of tube laying down, and he sort of, all he does is he's I think he just puts his shoulders in there. And then he comes out and I said, look, Foxy's a big guy. Do you know what I mean? I said, look, if Foxy can fit in there, anyone can fit in there. I said, get rid of the big tube. We're going with the small tube. And at this stage, I'm putting people through. They're whizzing through. And then, you know, and then all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, God, Sam's a big guy. I say to him, right, and I put him last on purpose. So when he gets stuck in the tube, the moment he says, Staff, I'm stuck. I can't get through. Right, I lifted up the flap, which kept it dark in there, and I was like, "What do you mean you're stuck?" He went, I'm not shitting around. I'm not joking around. I am stuck. I went, shut the hell. You know, I sort of just told him to calm down. So at this stage, my whole career is just flashing in front of me. It's like health and safety, you know, and Middleton kills, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, you know, in order to get this tube out, we're going to have to dig it out and crane it out and crane Sam's big fat head out of there. So I lift up the flat nice and cool, and I say to him, I forgot what number he was, number 12, I think. I said, number 12, I said, I shouldn't be telling you this, but do you not think that we've put someone bigger than you through this fucking tube, right? And you see him, he's looking up, he's got these little puppy dog eyes at this stage, because he is literally dying in that tube. He's literally got
now you need him to get out, for your sake. You're
so
like,
now I need it. So talk about psychological mind games. So I say to him, do you know, and you can see something just twigged inside of him, and I've been stuck in what's called the Smarty tube before, with all my kit on down at Lympstone through Royal Marine training, and all I'd done to get out, I literally couldn't move, but I just pushed my toes. All I'd done with my toes was bend them back and just inch myself inch by inch, and then when I said that, you know, do you not think that gave him that sense of hope, that sense of belief, right? Which changed. I could see it in his eyes. I could literally, and then when I told him the technique to push with his toes, he'd done that for about 45 minutes until I could reach in, grab his hand, and sort of pull him out the tube. And then obviously my career came flourishing back to me.
Yes.
But that was the moment that I thought to myself, you know, this is where, you know, claustrophobia, tight spaces. This is the fear and phobia that
it's funny when the human mind sees someone else do it or knows someone else has done. It's like the 4-minute mile that hadn't been cracked. Someone cracked
like
it.
Someone training in
air locker.
Yeah. It can be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think they stripped all the oxygen out of the room that day when I was in there. But when somebody breaks the 4-minute mile, people think it's not possible. And then I think within 12 months, like another 3 or 4 people did it. Yeah. Just the belief of someone doing it.
But that's purely psychological. You know, Matty, when you look at it, it's purely psychological. And that's what I say, you know, that's why we demonstrate everything. I go, right, I'm going to tell you this once only. Watch into the demonstration. We're going to explain it once. It's over to you. And that we do it, and they go, right, it can be done. And then it's a case of, right, he's done it his way. How do I do it my way? So then there's that, and then there's like, well, if I do it my way, do I trust myself? Am I capable of doing this? All this self-doubt comes in that you put on yourself. And this is the interesting psychological aspect of the show. And this is why I love doing it, because it's so much more. When I first started out there, like, and just the production job, just do a boot camp, I'm like, no, guys, so much. Don't belittle me. Don't go so much deeper than this. And then when you actually see it, like you said, you thought you were in that tube. You thought that's what the show's about.
Yeah, right. Now the other end of the spectrum on that show, that series, which I don't want to be too hard on, because actually, I think toward the end he really redeemed himself, and you saw the demons he was battling was Mark Philippoussis. But the bit that I still laugh when they're all about all the contestants are about to go into the water, a swimming challenge. I forget exactly what it was, but everyone's got their gear, and they go, "Okay, is everyone ready?" And Phil just go, "Oh, can I just say something?" What? He goes, "I've just got a sandwich in my bag. Has anyone got a plastic bag that I can wrap it in?"
I love it when things are, because normally it's one of the other DS. They wouldn't dare say it if I was running the stance. So normally it's one of the other DS running it, and so I'm in the background and my ears prick up and I'm just like, step aside, step aside. And that's what I love about it as well, And people say, "And are you like this in real life? Are you screaming?" I'm like, no, this is the disciplinarian military instructor. This is why all the instructors are so different. Ollie's got a softer approach. Foxy's, more of a sort of sit back, take it all in person. I'm in your face, up your arse as such, because I dealt well with that in the military. When I had a military instructor that was on my arse, telling me if I didn't get to the front of the group that he was going to kick my head in, that he was going to, pummel me in after this, and how dare I, and he's in my ears ringing. I reacted well to that. That's what made me actually go, "Oh, I don't want this guy on my arse," and I'd get to the front of the group. Where some people don't deal well with that. Some people, more of a, right, you're better than this. You've let yourself down, and you've let the team down.
And you've let your family down.
Yeah, exactly. You let your family down. So that's why I do it, because that's how I reacted well in the military. So all I'm doing is reciprocating what worked for me, and then that might be your time to step in and go, right, that's not working for him. This is where Foxy steps in. This is where Ollie steps in.
Coop said before, being in the all the things that you've done and experienced, you're a great judge of character. When you stand there straight away, when the contestants come through one by one, can you go, they're going to make it, they're not? Do you know straight away?
Yeah.
Instinctively, you know straight away.
I know within the, and that's why we thrash them, and they're probably giving it away a little bit here, but it's a technique that we use, which is called, when we process them, when we strip them down and we give them their numbers and we give them, there's a whole reason behind that. We're not just, basically stripping them from being a civilian and sort of into a military individual. I'm assessing, absolutely, yeah. That's why I give my main brief and I step back from that, because I can just tell by their demeanor, by the way they're looking around, by their gaits, by the way they're holding themselves, if they're disciplined. I can tell if they're here for the right reasons. I can tell if they're committed to the cause. If they're just going to surrender themselves to the process. I can tell that within the first 5 minutes, just by someone. It's just like, I can just tell. And those people that are just there, listening in, taking it all in, doing their own stuff at the beginning, because that's what you do. You want to do your own shit to make sure that you're squared away in that processing phase, because there's nothing teamwork about it. It's like, right, he's telling me how to act, he's telling me how to dress, he's telling me I need to do things. Can I take that in from day dot? And then from the very first command thereafter, I know who the people that are there for the right reasons.
Right, our society, Ant, do you think generation by generation we are getting softer?
Softer physically, yes, but we're getting way more savvy. You look at Special Forces selection right now. You just had to be a hard guy. Do you know what I mean? Resilient. You put your house on your back. Travel over the mountains. pick up a weapon, be safe with it, get into a firefight. It's endurance, resilience, and hardship. Once you got through that, you're a hardened soldier. Where now it's a lot more technical, it's a lot more tactical, it's a lot more tech savvy, shall we say. So I would say that the caliber of individuals now moving with the modern world actually suit it quite nicely. Yeah. But when it comes to the resilience and the hardship and the hard, that is lacking. So there's I like the balance between the two. But then you look at the world, you think, where are we headed? Are we gonna ever need to suffer such hardships ever again? You talk about modern day warfare. It's drones, buttons, it's technical, it's tech savvy, it's boots on the ground. Boots on the ground, which is always needed for that, for that sort of clarified intel picture. But the way the world's going, softer definitely, but I think the younger generation are moving in the right direction.
And I feel sorry sometimes for young men. Because a lot of words get thrown around these days. And one that is so overused by people, you hear it in woke, is toxic masculinity, right? Now, I get it. I know what toxic masculinity is, right? I know. But I've seen situations where a person has saved someone and they've gone out and said, it was all about them, it's toxic masculinity. And I just think it does my fucking head in.
Yeah.
I cannot believe it. It's like, okay, all these people believe in toxic masculinity, but what about if someone breaks into your house, right? It's got a gun and you require, believe it or not, I hate to say it, but a male to actually help you.
Yeah. No, absolutely, mate. Listen, that's just a word. I think, I know it's just a fad. Lots of things have come into play, and all of a sudden, just they're non-sustainable. It's like toxic. Being too masculine, being too, that's non-sustainable. That's a fad that's come in, and it will die out like all the other fads have over the last few years. I don't take any notice of it. And at the end of the day, when you know yourself, I know that I'm a good man. Yes, I've got faults. I've got negative traits about me, but that's a tiny percentage of who I am. 90% of me is good, is compassionate, is loving, is empathetic, is accepting. Again, going back to being that bully with a weapon, I know that in those moments of pure humanity, life and death, that I'm a good man. My instincts are good. So as long as I know that, then of course you're going to be judged. Of course people are going to jump on the bandwagon, and it's very hard not to react to it. But ultimately you're reacting to someone else's ideology, someone else's sort of thoughts and process. And I've learnt not to do that. And that's why people say about myself, I just stay true to who I am. When people know me for who I am, they know exactly what they're going to get. They know exactly what they're getting themselves in for. They know exactly that they're going to get a raw, authentic version of myself. I'm not really going to beat around the bush, but I'm happy to accommodate. But then, obviously, with the media and all of these fads coming in and out, they try and fit you into a certain category. And for someone like myself, it would be into that category. And I've taken a lot of flack for it, but I'm still here, mate. Do you know what I mean? It's like so the storm, the storm will come over you, but as long as you stay true to yourself and your direction in life, that storm will pass.
It's you talking about how you're a disciplinarian, because that's what worked for you. That's your coaching style now. I had a coach, Craig Bellamy, at the Storm. He was very much the same. That obviously worked for him. It brought the best out of him. So he was like that. His favourite saying was making you comfortable with the uncomfortable, put you in situations on the sporting field that would be as uncomfortable as it gets, and you train that so when you're out there in those situations, you feel comfortable in it. I was watching The Accountant the other day. Great movie, The Accountant. But I got thinking...
Did you come out of the air locker? Did you come out of the air locker straight into The Accountant?
Straight into The Accountant.
He actually thought it was a documentary.
Yeah, it was. But I was watching it, and leading into this interview, I got thinking, I wanted to ask you, because you are a disciplinarian, you're a hard coach, you push people hard. In that movie, Ben Affleck, he plays a character as Asperger's, and his dad had a military background, and his theory was rather than bring him up in an environment where he's nurtured, he would push his son and put him in the most uncomfortable situations to train his mind to be comfortable when he was an adult in those situations. And I mean, obviously it worked out. He was killing people by the end, which we don't condone, not in general society, of course. But it just made me, think, particularly in the modern society where there is a lot of not wanting to put people in uncomfortable situations to nurture them. Do you think that's a bit of a hindrance? Like in some cases it isn't, but do you think putting people in those situations?
Well, I did that for you, Cooper. Do you remember I never used to let the butler cook for you?
Used to
and look how
scrape it onto the floor and used to pick it up off the floor and
and look at me now. Jeez, killing it.
But you know what, Cooper? No, you're exactly right. Society doesn't cater for the uncomfortable. Everything is done for you. You're taught where to go. You're controlled where to go. You're told how to act. You're told how to think, especially more and more in modern day society. But I always say to my children, there's no growth in comfort. And what I mean by that is I will give my children enough rope to trip up on, but not obviously enough rope to hang themselves, hypothetically, because that's irresponsible parenting. But I know my son's heading into a direction, and I'm just like, oh, son, and I could go, whoa, there. But I'm just like, and moments where you just go, no, to my wife, just let him figure it out.
Let him step in the pothole.
Boom, he's hit face first, and I'm just like dragging him up and going, son, are you good? Right, listen, and then, but 9 times out of 10, when you debrief your son once, or your children, or work colleague, or whatever it may be, when they've taken a hard fall, they've already debriefed themselves. They've already figured it. 90% of it, they figured it out themselves. And all you do is you use that small 5% where you just point in the right direction and guide and protect from the rear, right? Yeah. And it's just like, oh no, he's going to hang himself. Right, son, whoa, hold on, or my daughter, whoa, darling, look at this in a different way, tackle this in a different way. I can see what's coming through my life experience, and they're the hard conversations that we have through life, right?
Yeah, got to let them step in their own potholes sometimes.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey, Ant, finally, Mayor of London.
Oh, the Mayor of London!
What are you thinking?
But you know what, mate? With the Mayor of London, it's when I look at my purpose in life and what I've done and where I've been. I'm a server of people. It's as simple as that. When I was in the military, I'd serve my muckers, I'd serve my country, I'd serve, at the time the Queen and the countrymen and women of my country. When I look at everything that I've done in the media, I'm just serving people. And what I mean by serving people, I'm there to help you become the best version of who you can be. I'm there to help you identify, where your fears and phobias are, and how to overcome them, and how to be emotionally intelligent enough and psychologically resilient enough to get through life. And so when the Mayor of London sort of came up, and my name got bantered around, I thought to myself, do you know what? I've served in the military. I'm now, in this media space where ultimately I'm still serving the people, which I truly believe that I am when you go deep into it. And a career, not so much in politics, because even though the Mayor of London is a small political role, it's not, which I really like, and hence why I've been really keen to sort of push on with it. I just think, with the state of London at the moment, and the crime and the personal safety that's there, and you only have to, walk the streets and see it, that I feel the need to serve again. And that's what it is. It's not, I live a good life. Trust me, Cooper, mate. I live a good life. I'm happy. My kids are happy. They're thriving in life. I'm bouncing around the world doing my thing. The last thing, believe it or not, I want to go back to is England. Is the rain. Is the misery of the UK.
And if you thought Afghanistan was hard, wait till you get to politics, mate. Jesus Christ, that's cutthroat.
Exactly. So listen, it's not confirmed. It's but it's not denied. It's something that I'm really considering with the family. But when I left the military, I promised my wife, which I didn't do. I promised my wife that I'd put the family first. But when I was in the military, I didn't, and that was for obvious reasons. But now it feels like I'm going back on that promise if I jump into this.
Well, if you do get in, the reason I ask, if you do get in, I've got a few tax problems still existing over there.
Haven't we all, mate? Haven't we all?
Hey, Ant, you're a champion, mate. We don't take any more of your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on all your success, brother.
Thank you, my man. Thank
Legend.
you. Guys, thank you.